This is the Pakistani version of West Point. It is in a really attractive part of Pakistan. It's a nice part of the country. It's about the same elevation that Denver is at. It's about 4,000 feet above sea level. And it was there last weekend that the man who is really sort of in charge in Pakistan, not the president or the prime minister, but the guy who's really in charge, the head of the army. It was there last weekend that the head of the army in Pakistan, the guy who's really in charge, he gave a speech to Pakistani army recruits. And he's an important enough guy that the speech was carried live on state television. In that speech, the head of the Pakistani army said this. He said, quote, "The terrorists' backbone has been broken." In other words, he declared victory over terrorism in Pakistan. Pakistan's version of West Point is located in a town you might have heard of now called Abbottabad. And when the head of Pakistan's army spoke there last weekend, when he declared victory over terrorism, in all likelihood, he was standing about 1 mile from Osama bin Laden's bedroom elsewhere in Abbottabad. In announcing Osama bin Laden's death last night, President Obama was clear and emphatic that Pakistan was not notified in advance about the strike that killed Osama bin Laden, nor did personnel from any other country, including Pakistan, take part in that operation. Nevertheless, elements of Pakistan's intelligence service insisted today that bin Laden was killed in a joint U.S.-Pakistani operation. For years, the Pakistani intelligence service had said publicly that Osama bin Laden was dead. Now that he actually is dead, they want credit for killing him. After nearly 10 years of hunting for Osama bin Laden, he was finally found and finally killed in a city just outside the capital city of Pakistan. He was not in the mountainous border region of Afghanistan. He was not in the lawless, semi-autonomous tribal areas. He was not in a cave. He was in a big, nice house in a city where Pakistani military officers go to retire, a hop, skip, and a jump away from Pakistani's version of West Point. This probably should not surprise us as much as it did, because so many of the other big al-Qaeda fish who have been caught over the last decade have been caught in the same way that Osama bin Laden was. Not just in Pakistan, but specifically in Pakistani cities. On the one-year anniversary of 9/11, this man, Ramzi bin al-Shibh, was taken into custody. Where was he caught? Not in a cave.
Ramzi bin al-Shibh, who helped plan the World Trade Center and Pentagon attacks, was taken prisoner in a dramatic Karachi shootout on the one-year anniversary of the attacks last September 11th.
Ramzi bin al-Shibh caught in Karachi. Karachi, the largest city in Pakistan. That tends to be the kind of place these guys get caught.
After searching hundreds of mountain caves, the U.S. military failed to capture any of Osama bin Laden's top commanders. Instead, it took good U.S. intelligence and the Pakistani police to land the biggest catch yet. He's Abu Zubaydah, a 31-year-old Palestinian, number 3 in the al-Qaeda terrorist network. Backed up by the CIA and FBI, Pakistani police captured Zubaydah in Faisalabad.
Faisalabad, Pakistan's third largest city. A year after Abu Zubaydah was captured in Pakistan's third largest city, it happened again.
In the hunt for Osama bin Laden, tonight another big arrest. Another one of his lieutenants. Once again, it's in Pakistan, and once again, it's in a big urban center. This time in the city of Lahore, 200 miles southeast of the capital, Islamabad.
Lahore, not in a cave somewhere, not in the autonomous tribal regions, but in Lahore, in Pakistan's second largest city.
Good evening, everyone. A major victory tonight in the war on terror. The suspected mastermind of the 9/11 attacks against the United States, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, was arrested in Pakistan.
He was arrested before dawn in Pakistan, in Rawalpindi near Islamabad, by Pakistani and American agents.
Rawalpindi, otherwise known as Pakistan's fourth largest city. Most of the terrorists who are in custody who had anything to do with 9/11, who you have ever heard of because they're a big enough deal for you to have heard of them, have been arrested in big cities in Pakistan, often in nice houses in big cities in Pakistan. If you Google Rawalpindi, what comes up in English is a million mentions of it as a garrison city. They always use that phrase, a garrison city. The other place in Pakistan you find constantly described as a garrison city, if it's described at all, is Abbottabad, where Osama bin Laden was just found. A garrison city basically just means that it is a military city. It is a city intensely populated with both military personnel, retired military personnel, and also military facilities. In a country where the military and the intelligence service are the most powerful forces around, where they run everything, where they're way more in control than the nominal government is. Where Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and Osama bin Laden were found were where those people live, where the nation's elite live, where the nation's military officers live, these garrison cities. Both of these guys caught in nice big houses in garrison cities from which that country's elite military and intelligence personnel have been telling the United States that terrorism, oh, that's over. That bin Laden, he was nowhere in sight, that there was no use looking for bin Laden anymore, particularly in Pakistan, because bin Laden was probably already dead. As recently as 2 weeks ago, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, while he was in Pakistan, he directly accused Pakistan's intelligence service of supporting the main militant group that is fighting U.S. troops in eastern Afghanistan. On a trip to Pakistan in 2009, Hillary Clinton bluntly accused the Pakistani government of knowing where Osama bin Laden was, telling reporters then, quote, "I find it hard to believe that nobody in your government knows where he is and couldn't get him if they really wanted to." Just last week, a federal indictment about the Mumbai attack. A federal indictment was filed in Chicago. It reportedly names a serving Pakistani intelligence officer as one of the people who planned the devastating Mumbai terrorist attack. Pakistan, 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 Pakistan. It has been Pakistan from the beginning. It's still Pakistan. How long is it going to keep being Pakistan? Today, on the occasion of Osama bin Laden's death, the New York Times ran a big 5,000-word obituary of bin Laden. It describes bin Laden bragging about his American-made weapons and the American trainers who supported him and his Mujahideen fighters in Afghanistan against the Soviets in the 1980s. What bin Laden did not brag about was that even though he and his fighters got that American training and they got those American weapons, they never got them directly from Americans. The U.S. was being careful, of course, to avoid getting drawn into a hot war in Afghanistan with the Soviets. So even though we gave that training and those weapons to bin Laden in Afghanistan in the 80s, we never really got it to him all that directly. Instead, we used a middleman. Who do you think we used as the middleman? We used the Pakistani intelligence service as the middleman when we wanted to arm bin Laden. The whole post-9/11 idea of waging a war on terrorism was to go after terrorists themselves, right? But to also go after their sponsors. You go after the countries that sponsor terrorist groups and fund them. Iraq never did that. That was a red herring. That was a distraction from actually fighting terrorism. But Afghanistan, in its own way, was kind of a hard case, too. Because Osama bin Laden supported the Taliban in Afghanistan. It was bin Laden supporting them. He propped them up. He funded them out of his considerable fortune for years. And yes, they did provide him protection in return. But the real sponsor that built Osama bin Laden into the terrorist godfather he became, the thing other than his own skills and his own money that built his power and provided him a haven from retribution, that was Pakistan. That was our great ally, Pakistan. Where last weekend, the head of Pakistan's army proclaimed, don't worry, he had broken the back of terrorism, while he stood 1 mile away from Osama bin Laden's bedroom. Our great ally. Joining us now live from Benghazi in Libya is NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel. Richard, thanks very much for joining us. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, of course, and it's a very windy evening, so you'll excuse the wind, but it is an incredible development that has been happening. And I think you're right. It has always been about Pakistan, and yet U.S. troops went and fought in Iraq. And that, in the end of the day, had nothing to do with bringing Osama bin Laden to justice.
Richard, what do you think happens next with Pakistan? People are describing Pakistan as having explaining to do, as being embarrassed, as having finally been called out for the lies they have perhaps knowingly been telling all of these years about Osama bin Laden. We can't look into a crystal ball about what happens next, but based on your understanding of the players here, what do you think happens next between us and that country?
Well, I think in the short term, the U.S. military wants to maintain as civil as relations as possible with Pakistan. Of course, Osama bin Laden